I'm going to just... It should be right there. Okay, so later, let's talk a little bit about it. The things that you want to be able to see. Let me actually write this down for you too. I'll use the MRT note. Put them up here. Okay, so nameplates. As well. So things that you want your nameplates to help you with are you want to know mob types. So this is going to be quest, hostile, or I'm trying to think, like neutral mobs, friendly, etc. So you want to know the type of mob. You want to have some indicator for targeted or focused, so that you can see which mob you have targeted, which one you have focused. You want to be able to see cast bars, and those are very important. Outside of that, you want to be able to see buffs and debuffs. Then you also want to be able to easily differentiate between important mobs in a dungeon. Sorry, I'm really bad at typing, so this was maybe a terrible idea, but oh well. Other than that, you want to be able to have any other information that you want. So this is going to be extra information, which is things like if you like your resources shown on your nameplates. So if you're a combo point class, you can set it up to have your combo points show on your target nameplate, things like that. Or if you want something like an indicator for a buff being missing or a debuff being missing. Other things like that. So just like kind of niche extra information that you can put on there. So this is kind of what we're gonna go through as like a game plan for what we're gonna talk about. And then I guess up here at the top there's one more thing where you want it to be aesthetically pleasing. I don't know if that's spelled right. If it's not, I'm sorry. So this is kind of the game plan for going through looking at these things with Plater. So with that, obviously this is an add-on that you would have to go download. Once you have it downloaded, if you use any other kind of nameplate modifier, you would have to turn it off. For example, if you're an LVUI user and you have LVUI nameplates enabled, if you have LVUI and Plater nameplates enabled, nothing works. It all looks terrible. Things get very strange very quickly. So just make sure that any other nameplate add-on that you have is turned off so that it's just Plater. Once you have that, you have a giant settings screen here. There are so many settings to go through. Some of them are more relevant than others, depending on how you play the game and what you're interested in. So we're going to start with these different points, starting with making them aesthetically pleasing. So there are some settings that are a little bit weird in like where they're located. for example, most of what we're going to look at right now for aesthetics is going to be in enemy NPC. So this is where you can edit specifically enemy NPC information versus you can also edit these enemy NPC nameplates using your general setting, your color settings, stuff like that. So we'll start here. First couple things to look at would be size. So if you look over here, these are some nameplates, and my health bar size out of combat and in combat, I can just edit here. So if I put this all the way up, all the way down, obviously that changes. I'm going to set mine back to 85 because that seems reasonable. You can also change the height here as well. It does have specific settings for out of versus in combat, so you can have nameplates get larger when you're in combat, or smaller. Smaller would be a little bit weird, but to each their own. So for example, I could make this, these be like my general nameplates, and then if I were to attack the mob, now that nameplate is larger, and I'm too low level to actually, that didn't take as long as I feared. So that's all personal preference there. Second thing you can look at is, sorry, it's a little bit weird, but that's okay. Looking at text and font. So there's a lot of different fonts here. You can see I have font drop downs in about, oops. In a bunch of different places, so you can control the font of everything individually, and that goes for the not just the font but also the color and the sizing. So right here, these two options generally I personally am not going to use. This is for when you have no health bar showing, so if you used, say, name only nameplates as opposed to the health bar nameplates, this is where you would edit it. Because we generally will use the health bars, we're going to use this set of settings for the name. So for example, if I wanted to change the font to Expressway, I do it right there, and you can see that it changes all of these. I can also change the color if that appeals to you. You can also change like the font style, changing it to all of these, you know, typical styles that you would see in WoW. And then you can also change the offset. So I personally like having my name, the name of the mob, centered on the top, but if you wanted it, say, on the top left, and then you could have it just sit right there. You could have it sit on the top here, and then change the Y offset to put it down. So basically you can just use these couple settings to change it to whatever you would like. Sorry, just put this. Right. Oh. From here, the second set of settings, that was a weird thing, but that we can look at is the actual health text. So I changed the name here. Over here is where I'm going to change my health text, so I can go ahead and move this into the same font. For me, I can make it a little bit smaller so that it's not as prominent there, because generally I just don't need it to be as large. You can change here what or when you have it showing, right? So you can check that it will only show in combat versus showing out of combat as well. You can show it as just a number, or a percent, or just a percent, or both. You can also have it show extra decimals here as well. Same thing, you can change the outline, all of that kind of stuff. You can also actually have it faded if you would like. And then finally, of course, you can move where on the mob's nameplate it is, if I wanted it to be under or, you know, basically wherever. Final thing you can do is looking at the level text. So you can see here, it's very faint. Oh, and so if we wanted to make it a little bit more obvious, turning up the alpha, we wanted to move it a little bit down or up so that it's just like basically wherever you wanted it to be. And then changing the font as well. Last thing we can do here is look at quest tracking options. So this is talking more about the mob types again. You can see that these mobs have this orange color nameplate, which is showing me that it is a hostile in quest NPC. If I move elsewhere, go over this way for you, we can see that a non-quest NPC is not going to be that orange color. It's instead just this red color. So you can modify this whether you want, the default is going to be that orange color for quest mobs if they're hostile, and this yellow color for quest mobs if they are neutral. You can change those however you would like. Moving on to other color options. So this is going to be talking about your general, neutral, hostile, friendly. You can use these colors here to change that. So we saw that mob over here, that was that red color. If I wanted it to be, say, pink instead, I can change it there, and then we come over, and now these hostile mobs are pink nameplates. You can also change the aggro color. So if you have an aggro indication of if it's when you're playing as a tank versus when you're playing as a DPS or a healer, you can change the color for when you have threat, when threat's on another tank, when you have threat but it's low, don't have threat, when you're pulling threat. And then as a DPS or a healer, you have a couple fewer options where you just have threat on you, high threat, or no threat. You also have this option to use a solo color, which I like a lot. Basically what this means is that if I'm not in a group and I'm not a tank, it's gonna just give me a, in this case, like purple colored nameplate instead of having them always be like this red you have threat color, because obviously if there's no one else in your group, you're going to have threat on the mob that you pulled. Finally, you have a couple other color options for if the unit isn't in combat or if the unit is tapped. So if you can no longer get credit for killing the mob because another faction hit it in the open world is the biggest one, you can change the color that indicates that as well. The other things that are, I think, very, very cool here is that with these threat colors, you can have them change some or none or all of these three options. So the health bar, and then also the border color, and finally the name color. So I have it change all three. The reason for this is because just changing the health bar color is generally good, but we have another thing that we can use health bar colors for, which I'll show you in just a moment, that makes it very nice to have those other two indicators with both the name and the border color. So what that option here is for the nameplate colors that we may not want to see threat on them are this screen. It's called NPC colors and names. So with this, if you pull it up and you're looking at nameplates, you can see that I get this option underneath that is for convenience. Basically what this will do is it allows you to select certain mobs and change the color of their nameplates. Yes, I will be this one will go up in that playlist as well. So you don't actually have to follow along with everything right now. You can just get a general idea, and then if you forget something or have questions, you can go back and watch the VOD later and find the spot. So with this option, it's very, very effective for things like Mythic Plus keys, because you can change every mob of a certain type to show as a color. So for example, if I change this Cinder Witch to blue, now if I fly around here, all of the Cinder Witches are blue nameplates, and they're very easily identifiable, versus if I go back over this way, these other bird-like things and the rocks, they're not blue. And so I can see that we don't actually have any Cinder Witches over here. They're all these Sky Witches or Doom Whalers. So if I wanted to be able to differentiate between which one is a Sky Witch and which one is a Doom Whaler, I can just change the color of one of those two, and now I can see this set over on the right are all the one mob type, versus these ones over on the left are the opposite mob type. This doesn't seem that helpful for world content like this, but imagine you're going into a key. We can take an example from one of our Mythic Plus dungeons in the current season, say Freehold. So in Freehold, if you are familiar with the beginning of the dungeon, pull up Indeed here too. Oh, I don't have it loaded. That's fine. If you're familiar with the beginning of the Freehold dungeon, there are mob types called crack shots that will not move. And that is really relevant because generally what that means is you want to kill those mobs first, so that then you can chain into other mobs without worrying about something standing still way behind you. So you can change that mob color to pink or whatever color is going to draw your attention that says, like, this mob needs to die first. Similarly, if you have a mob that is, say, higher health on a bolstering week, so if we're keeping Freehold as our example, you have the mobs that will do the AoE shout, and those have a much higher health pool than other mobs, and so having some indication of that is going to make it much easier to be able to target that particular mob and get that one down to a lower health percentage, so that so that you can easily identify it in this giant group of nameplates. So NPC colors, very cool. You can go into an M0 or whatever and change them via this, or if you wanted to not have to go to where the mobs are, like I said, that one mob is a crack shot, so I can just start searching crack shot and it'll come up here. This is the mob, and I've selected hot pink as my color indicator there. We can also sort by zone, so if I just look up Freehold, you can see that all of these Freehold mobs are here. These are all of the ones that I have chosen to color code, and then down here are the ones that I have not chosen to color code. You can also see that I have a set of colors here, that a lot of them are the same, and for me that is so that I can use ideas like groups of mobs and make them all the same color. So for example, all of these bright pink fuchsia colored mobs, these are all the bosses. So you can see that every boss in the dungeon is color coded bright pink. These two dark blue mobs are the ones that have higher health, that, like I was talking about, on those bolstering weeks we would want to focus on. Then these aqua ones are kind of similar, but they have extra mechanics here to be aware of, so things like the officer that does a debuff on the tank, or the trapper, which is going to put those traps out, things like that. For me, I use hot pink to indicate that this is a dangerous or very relevant mob that you have to look out for, so things like the barrel on that second boss, or the duelist, which is going to do that charge that you have to be very aware of because it will harm anything in its path. And so just seeing the destination isn't good enough. You need to know where the mob is coming from. And so that's much easier to do when you have this hot pink nameplate that you just go, oh, there it is. Similarly, like I was talking about, the crack shot and then the harpooner, which is going to yoink you in, and that's generally just a very dangerous mob. So it also got hot pink. I use the light sky blue and the medium slate purple to indicate important kicks in a dungeon. So these are the two mobs that are very important to kick, and then I have the differentiation between that is mostly just because sometimes you have multiple mobs that need to be kicked in the same pull, and so it's nice to be able to know which one is which. Excuse me. Finally, for me, this olive color is just a mob that is dangerous for the tank generally, so anything that does like something that is relevant for the tank that may need to be stopped, I try and put in that olive color. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how using the different color-coded nameplates can be helpful. If you want to get funny and fun with it, you can also change the names. So if you wanted to, I'm not very creative, so I haven't changed the names, but I'm sure that other people out there have found a lot of really fun things to call certain mobs depending on what they do or how they make you feel. You would just click in here and type in the name that you want to appear on the nameplate. So to give you an example, I'll look up these mobs again, the Kralik Doomwalker here. If I wanted to call this like a burb, now they're all just called burb. I don't know why it changed. It's a little weird. But now it's, you know, named something different. Alright. I know I'm talking and going through this kind of fast. That is a lot of why the VOD will be up so that you can go back and reference as you change things for yourself. Now that we've looked at like general aesthetics and glance value color coding, I want to take a look at buffs and debuffs. So this is probably the most important thing for any kind of dot class, basically. So for this one, you can do your buff tracking in a couple of different ways. Right now, what I have up in like the buff settings are test auras. I can disable those and it goes back to normal. But showing the testing auras allows me to get a good idea of what these buffs and debuffs are going to look like. You have 2 aura frames to play with Plater. You have 1 and 2. I have 2 enabled. You can just put everything on the same one, but I like having a little bit of differentiation. For me, what I use this for is generally all of these ones on aura frame 1, which for me are anchored top left, are going to be the debuffs, and then aura frame 2, which is anchored directly to the left of the nameplate, is going to be the buffs on the mob. And that's pretty much a default automatic differentiation. You don't really have to do anything to get aura frame 1 to be debuffs and aura frame 2 to be buffs. So we'll start with the aesthetics here, and starting with this, you can choose where to anchor your debuffs, how to grow them. So say instead I wanted these to be like centered horizontally right above, I would change this to top, and then I would have my grow direction be centered, and now all of my debuffs are going to be centered right above the nameplate there. Similarly, you can change where the aura frame 2 is located. I won't demonstrate that right now. We can change the alpha of the buffs, so if you want them to be a little bit more faded out versus a little bit more there, you can change that here. You can change the spacing, so if you want them to be further apart versus closer together, you can change that as well. You also have options for stacking similar auras, so if you have a debuff that stacks, which apparently Warlock's Unstable Affliction does. I don't play Warlock, so I'm not quite sure. But you can use that to show as well. And then again, you can select to show the timer on the debuff to be the shortest possible timer or not. And then you can also have it sort by time remaining or not. Question, would you do stuff like this before a new season or during the first few weeks when you get to know the dungeons? Yes, both is what I do. So typically, I'll start with doing everything. I'm assuming you mean for like the NPC colors, because everything else should transition very easily from season to season, because generally you're going to be looking for the same thing unless you decide, oh, I hate this, I want to change it. So for the NPC names and colors, how I generally do it is I have a couple steadfast rules for my color coding. One of them that you saw was that every boss in every dungeon is this like hot pink fuchsia color. So that is super easy to do going into a season. So like before I step foot in a dungeon for season 3, I can go through, like I know Dawn of the Infinite is going to be there. I haven't done this yet, so I can actually show you. These are all the bosses in there, so I can just look them up. Ah, okay. Another fun fact about this. I could just look them up and then select the color there. With these NPCs, I'm going to highlight this note right on top. For raid and dungeon NPCs, they are added into the list after you see them for the first time. So the reason that nothing comes up here when I search Chronocar is because the character that I am on, whose nameplates I am playing with, is level 40, and she has clearly never been in Dawn of the Infinite. She has never seen this mob, and so it's not there. The exception to that would be she has also never actually been in Freehold, and she has not seen this mob, but I copied her profile from my main so that I could play with it here on stream. And so because in my main profile, this mob is color-coded, when I then copy that profile, all of my color coding stays. And so these mobs are here even though I haven't actually seen them on this character. But yeah, so certain ones, I don't know why I closed that. Certain ones I will do beforehand, because I know them, right? I know all the bosses. Other ones, I may not know, right? So I don't necessarily know what the important kicks are in a new dungeon yet, and so that's something that I'll go through and change the first week or so of the patch. And I'll continue changing things because sometimes you don't know until you get to a higher key level, right? One of the examples for this would be in Brackenhide Hollow. There are, get the name, so let's look it up. These guys, the Claw Fighters, they do a focus on someone, and then they go towards and attack that person. In, like, the first week of dungeons that I was doing, I didn't even notice them. They didn't do anything. They didn't do enough damage to be noticeable. Once you get into a higher key level, so like, you know, 3 or 4 weeks later when I was doing 26, 27s, that mob will one-shot you. Then it becomes important, and I add the color coding at that point. So it's just kind of a continuous evolution of, oh, wait, I wish I'd been able to identify that sooner, or I wish I'd been able to find that mob sooner. And so I color-coded at that point. With certain affixes as well, yeah, so like, I think it's still here. Like explosives, I made this bright gold color, just because nothing else was that color, and it made them very easy to spot, especially when I was playing a healer that was more relevant for. But you can change all of your affixes, like I think Spitefuls I also have color-coded to that gold color, just to make sure that I know where they are. So yeah. Going back to buffs, let me reset this to you can change the sizes down here. and then that I would just pick a size that works with the size of your nameplate. This setting over here is where you would change the timer. So if you can see, I've disabled that. Now there is no countdown. When I enable it, I get this number at the top left. You can choose to show decimals or not, and then you can choose font, position, all of that shenanigans there. You can also show a swipe texture or not, so that's the swiping around as it goes. You can have it invert it, not invert it, just do all sorts of fun things with that. For tracking of what auras you want to track, that's going to be the second tab here, so buff tracking. You can choose between automatic and manual. You can see here I have manual set up for rogue spells only. To be quite honest, the reason for that is because way back, like at the very beginning of Shadowlands, I used JPC's Plater profile as a base and then mutilated it. And so he had gone through the effort to put in all of the spells that he wanted to track as a rogue and did it all manually. You can do that for sure, or you can just select automatic, especially with a new class, or if you don't really know what's important, the automatic tracking is pretty good. With the automatic tracking, if you go back into buff settings, you can play with it a little bit here, where you can show auras casted by you or not. You can show auras casted by other players. I personally recommend never letting that show, because who wants to see your druid's moonfire if you're playing a rogue, or your mage's flame shock or ignite if you're playing a boomkin? Like, it just crowds it up, so I definitely recommend not having this box checked. Then you have other options for important auras, dispellable, short dispellable on players, enrage, magic, crowd control, etc. Buffs casted by the unit would be like buffs, especially in dungeons or if you PvP. That can be really important. For this, you can change border colors. So if we come a little closer here, you can see that this enrage has a red border. That's, I can change here. These dispellable buffs on the left have that blue border. I can change that here, and then the standard buffs, crowd control, etc. You can change all of these colors to give you a little bit of a better glance value on what buffs are showing. All of that makes sense, hopefully. Going a little bit further, there's a couple interesting things that you can do with buffs on Plater as well. So the first one is going to be special buffs. It gives you a little picture here of what these look like. They're basically going to show, excuse me, on the right-hand side of the nameplate, and they're going to show a little bit bigger than a normal buff. How you decide which auras are going to show here is either adding a spell by spell ID, so if I wanted to do something there, or by using these little checkboxes. So for me, I have these checked. I would actually change this here for a mage, because crowd control I think is always important to look at, because you never want to stun something that's in a stun already and get that DR. So just having a lot better knowledge of what crowd controls are being used and when, I think is good, because then it shows up very obviously, and it will also ignore the box that you did here where you didn't show anything cast by other players. If you use crowd control as a special aura, it will show the crowd controls cast by other players. Then using the dispellable checkmark is pretty good, because obviously if there is a shield or whatever on a mob that you can spell steal or dispel or purge or whatnot, it's good to know that. And then you have a couple other options that you can show as well. Again, you have this option for border colors if you would so desire, and then you have all of your aesthetic appearance options here. So You can change where they're anchored. Like I said, the default is over on the right-hand side, but you can change that, make them bigger, smaller. Wide icons just makes them wider. All of this good stuff is just the aesthetics. Same thing here. You can show caster name if you would like to. And that goes for especially those crowd controls. Like if you have 2 druids and you want to know which druid in Caproard, showing the spell name will allow you to do that. Last thing with debuffs is ghost auras. So for this one, this is going to be if you have an aura that you need to keep track of when it's not there. So for example, if you wanted to show like when a debuff is missing to remind you like, hey, put this debuff up. You can do that here. You can add them by spell ID. It does not have an automatic add spells for this one yet because this is a newer option, but like you can add any spell ID here and it will show up as like a grayed out desaturated icon, and you can make it as big as you want. If you make it really big, it will very much call your attention like, hey, please debuff this mob. So going through, we've covered how to change the aesthetics here with all of these options and the colors. We've talked about identifying mob types. Your quest options are here. Your specific options are here. And then your general options for hostile, neutral, friendly, and aggro colors are here. You want indicators for a targeted or focused mob. So this one is going to be somewhere else as well. So for a target, it has its own little place. First thing you can do to identify it that I really like, as you can see, is making it bigger. That option is right here. So I have it turned all the way up because I tend to lose my target, quite frankly. And so having it be significantly bigger is really helpful. I also have this bright pink targeted glow, so you can see the bright pink around whatever my target is at. That really draws my eye to it. You can use a lot of different options here. You can have it be more faded out, less faded out, bigger, smaller. And then you can change the color there as well. You can also use a hover over highlight. So if I turn this up, you can see that when I hover over it actually changes the color of the nameplate here. Hopefully you can see that on the stream where it makes it a slightly lighter pink. So you can do that as well. You can change other options with the target, such as keeping it always on the screen, or different options for if the target is, say, behind you. And then you can also use like an overlay here. So if I use this overlay and make it this like metal plate option, I guess is the default, and so now it has that texture on it as well, makes it a little bit more obvious. You can use this like chess if you are really blind. I might actually use that in the future. You can use stripes, all of these different options, and then you can make it more or less obvious with the alpha. Similarly to that texture option, you have another texture option for your focus. So this one, it really just does let you change the texture or the color. So with this mob, for example, if I set it as my focus, now it has these big stripes in it. That's the default focus option. You can again use any other kind of texture here, and then you can change the color. So if I want like a green tinted texture, I can do that, and then when I go here, those stripes will be green, or like I said, any texture that you have will show up there. That black stripey bit for my focus. Last thing, since we're here and it's here as well, is the raid marker options. So For me, I have the raid markers show up top left. That is what you would change here. You can make them bigger, smaller. You can change where it's anchored if you'd rather have it in the center. Oh, goodness. You can have it centered. You can have it right on top. You know, basically anywhere you would like it to be. I'm going to put mine back to the left, and I will just move it back where it was before. This box is going to put an extra raid mark inside the health bar, so if you can see it, there's now a little triangle inside the nameplate as well. So you can check that option on and off. It just gives you an extra place to see like which mob is marked as what. Alright. Cast bars. That's the next thing we gotta look at. So we go to the cast bar options. You have a lot of different options you can do here with showing an interrupt anchor, playing an interrupt animation, filling cast on interrupt, all of these different options. And then you can change the texture of it, all of that good stuff. Use this option so that you can see. So this is how I have mine showing at the moment. You can change your spark texture here if you would so desire. And then you can change the color of the spark as well. Taskbar colors you can edit with the regular, channeled, uninterruptible, interruptible, and then success, and then you can also change the background color. You can show the target name or not. I think having it showing is super, super helpful, especially if you have the brain bandwidth to use that information. So for example, if you see one of your party members is at half health and there is a cast going off on them, that might be a higher priority to interrupt because it could just kill them outright, as opposed to if it's a mob is casting on a party member that has full health, you maybe can let that one go and save your interrupt for something more valuable. You can change the aesthetics of that as well. I have mine just anchored here, inner right, it'll show right there, and mine is also class colored. You can have the icon or not on each of your casts, and then you can edit that as well. The other thing that's really cool with cast bars is that you have this option similar to the mob names and colors. You can change cast names and colors. So you have all of these default animation options over here, and then you can add those into all of the different casts here in the much the same way as you do for the NPC names and colors. So this cast, for example, this one was in the train dungeon, Grimrail Depot, that's what it's called. So you can, this was actually a very important cast at that point. If it went off, your entire party wiped. And so you could have that cast bar be color-coded something different than all of these colors so that it really draws your attention to it. You can add a sound as well if you would like, to just really grab your attention and say like, this cast is about to go off, you need to do something about it. So that is very cool as well. We looked at buffs and debuffs. Sorry, I did that a little out of order than I had intended, but sometimes things just happen. And then easily differentiate between important mobs was about this color coding, and then again with the cast color coding. Extra info we also looked at a little bit. For the resources, that's going to be this separate option thing where it has combo points, so I can have it show on my personal bar, which I actually don't have enabled here, You can show a mount, you have it show the background, lots of different options there for combo points if you would like to use those as well. The final thing that I want to look at for extra info are scripts and mods. So this is what makes Plater truly special, I think, because there is so much that you can do completely customizable. So the difference between scripts and mods, I'll say first, and that is very small. There's not a big difference between these two, but how it works is that mods will apply to every nameplate that you see. Scripts will apply to certain mobs. So scripting doesn't go on everyone. You have to specify which mob type, mob ID it is going to go on, whereas mods will apply to any nameplate that you see. Generally, for mods and scripts, what I would suggest is using Wago to find the ones that you like. They are generally pretty difficult to create from scratch because it is all coding. If you're interested in coding and you like doing things like that, the Plater Discord is awesome. Even if you don't and you want to join the Plater Discord for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have, the people in there are super helpful, and they actually helped me build a mod from scratch because I wanted something that didn't exist. So different things that you can do with mods and scripts. One is this one that I think is very cool. You can, again, look it up on Wago. It's just called Interrupt Not Ready. Basically, what that allows you to do is change your cast bar depending on if your kick is up or not. So that will override the cast names and colors that you set up, but basically it lets you know immediately, are you going to be able to kick the cast or not? Is your kick on cooldown, or will it come off cooldown before the cast goes off? And if you spam it, you can get that kick off before the cast or not. And so that's really cool. Another one, this is the one that I made from scratch here, and basically this one is I'm going to duplicate it really quick in each version. Ignite. Basically what this one does is whenever a debuff isn't applied to a target, it will change the color of the nameplate. It has these custom options where you can change the color pre-debuff, and so now I'll show you what this actually does. Is if I run over and aggro this mob, I must have misspelled Ignite. Ignite. One moment. Oh, okay. I know exactly what I did. Sorry, awkward. Load conditions are important. So before I actually show you how it works, we do have to change the load conditions to load not on a druid, but instead on a fire mage. And that will fix that. So now I can actually show you. Unless I missed something else. It's entirely possible. I did miss something else. I missed that. Sorry, this is really awkward. This one specifically doesn't really work with aggro, because if you have aggro on it, the aggro color will take priority. Sorry. But it is really cool. It does change the nameplate color to this, whatever you select it, until you put the debuff on, and then once you put the debuff on, it'll change to whatever color you had selected in this menu as well. So those are a couple different mods, things that will apply to every nameplate that you see. There's another one that I think comes with Plater by default that will put absorb shields on your health bars. That's super helpful. Then looking at scripts, these things are for specific mob types. So for example, this one shows any mob that explodes when it dies, so things that do damage when they die, such as the ticks and underrot. This mod will, or this script will apply to, and it basically makes them a red background. Other things, if this one changes the size of the nameplate, so it'll make the nameplates smaller if they're one of these spell IDs, which are basically non-elite trash in dungeons. So things like the little mini flower-looking guys in Brackenhide. This will apply to based on their NPC ID and just make those nameplates smaller because they don't matter as much. Think if there's anything else that is super convenient with scripts. Not really that I can think of off the top of my head here. So scripts and mods, they can do basically anything you want them to do. And most things that you would want them to do, there is something on Wago that will do it already. And so you can just search in the same way that you would search for a weak aura. You can search for Plater mods and Plater scripts. And then if you wanted to import them, that option is right here. And then you would just paste the string. The good news with this too is you do not actually have to know if it is a script or a mod. If you put in on either window, either the scripting import or the modding import, it will put it in the appropriate section. So you can import either from either window. Cool. It's been about an hour here. If anyone has any questions for this, now would be an awesome time to ask them. I know I talked really fast through a lot of this, and that is, like I said, one of the big reasons that we will have the VOD that you can refer back to, but I also don't want to take up too much of your time this morning. All right. Thanks, Kat. I try to make it approachable, so I appreciate that. Do I have my Plater profile in Wago, and do I update it frequently? Yes and yes. So let me find the link. So that link is to my Plater profile, and there is one caveat to that where I have a mouse over glow. It's not actually enabled on this character, but I have a glow that applies when I mouse over a target as well that I used to use a lot for things like serrated bone spike. And if you want that to work, then you have to import a file and place it in your WoW icons folder. The instructions are on the Wago page. If you don't do that, it'll have like this really awkward green box over anything that you mouse over. So just fair warning on that. Yeah. If there's no other questions, I think I will let you all go for the day. This was our last cleaning up your UI workshop, so with that, if there's anything that hasn't been covered over the entire series and you've gone and watched all of the VODs and you would like more information on anything, I believe that we won't be necessarily closing the channel in the LWIW Discord, and so if you would like to see another workshop or you would like to hear from anyone specifically, please just go ahead and tag me in that channel, and I will try and do my best to get back to you and hopefully be able to make another workshop for whatever you guys come up with that I didn't think of in the first place. Okay. Yay! Thank you, Kat, for helping coordinate and just make it super easy to put this whole thing on. It's been awesome. Alrighty. Let's see if there's any fun LWI slides.